Hi everyone, this is Nathan from Snap and welcome to another of our Snap XMP webinars. Today we're going to be looking at how to design a questionnaire or form that has a tabbed layout rather than a more traditional linear layout of start to finish. It should take about 30 minutes and as ever there's plenty of resources available on our support hub which I'll be pointing you to at the end. First of all, we'll take a look at the basic setup of the questionnaire, activating the tab control settings which are used to create the various tab headers. We'll be looking at the option of adding in dynamic markers that indicate to the respondent what progress has been made and which sections require more input. Although my main example has been designed in Snap XMP, I'll also show you where the equivalent settings are turned on within Snap XMP Online, for those of you who are solely using the online element of our Snap XMP platform. As ever, along the way I'll be pointing out a few things for you to consider as you go about setting up a tabbed project. Key benefits to using a tabbed approach to your design. I would say this new tab control feature is one of the biggest visual changes to our software since I've been here, and that's far more years than I care to remember. But with this new look we get real distinct section headers that are visible throughout. Because they are visible at all times, the respondent can choose to complete the sections in any order, filling in sections as and when they have that data to hand. This can be really handy if you're doing an audit or evaluation where information might be coming to you at different stages. For that reason, this setup also lends itself very well to projects where the form is to be completed by a number of different people. So person 1 might complete sections A, B and D, and then person 2 might complete sections C and E, and perhaps a third person might even then review that before submitting the data. And generally, it just feels a lot more like an audit and collection tool and less like a questionnaire, which for some designers and some end users, so the actual person filling in the form, is quite an important plus point. And I should point out that this feature actually came about when a client came to us with a need to input data from all areas of the business. There was monetary information, data such as the number of Instagram followers, other social media platforms are available, gift shop visits, employee details, amongst a whole host of other information. And the people filling it in understandably didn't have all the data to hand and would need to collect data from multiple sources. Indeed, in some situations, the form was going to be completed by multiple members of the business. With a traditional questionnaire or form, this would mean lots of scrolling backwards and forwards, looking for the relevant sections, or they'd need to wait until all that data was collected before they started inputting it. But even then, it's like the layout and flow of the form wouldn't match how they'd collected that data in the first place. So they needed a better way of navigating through the questionnaire, and hence tab controls was born. Okay, let's head into the software and look at how a tab design is created. I'm going to be working in the webinars folder today. I'm going to be making use of a hospital ward audit as my main example. Scrolling down, you can see it's a fairly sort of normal setup with my image at the top, a number of different types of questions, broken down into sections, and each of my sections has a section header with a number of different page breaks as well. Now, before I go any further, I'm going to head into Snap Online and we're going to view the sort of live survey. I've got my ward and patient audit survey. And I'm just going to run the live link. As you can see, we've got a completely different sort of layout with different tabs across the top. And I've got some introduction text asking us to select a ward to begin with. So I will select a ward. As I do that, the name changes and that name will remain visible throughout the audit. So it's useful if I'm going to be coming back at a later stage to complete this. So I'll just fill out the remainder of the tabs. So I've completed tab number 1. I might then have a look at tab number 2. I might then jump on to tab number 4, be filling out some responses along the way. And then I might skip on to the final tab. So at this stage, I've got the option to either submit or save my data with a view to coming back at a later stage. In this example, I'm not logged in as a respondent, as in there's no sort of database link in the background with a list of participants. So when I save, I have the option of either copying this link and making use of it at a later date, or I can ask that link to be emailed to me. If I was logged in, then actually every time I'm completing answers and moving across the tabs, it would be auto-saving, so I could just click on the original link to resume. But I'll go back and carry on as I was. And you can see that the responses I gave earlier are still active. Okay, let's pop back into Snap to see how this was set up. So first of all, you can see that I've got page breaks on my survey, and they actually match where the tabs are. And you notice that actually the last tab was my sort of save and submit tab, so there weren't any questions on that, that was just information. But moving back up, I've got the different tabs on my different section headers. The actual text on those tabs though is actually dictated based on the very first question, which is a system variable called power data. And if you look down the bottom, you can see it says id.page, so that's the power data ID. And this is what Snap uses to convert the names on these labels into tabs. The page breaks then dictate which questions appear within which tab. And just to note that the first tab, all the questions before the first page break appear on it. So the first page break actually appears on the set of questions which are going to appear in this second tab. Now, if you're using an older survey, you're going to need to turn on this id.page variable yourself, which I'll be showing you a little bit later. But for any new surveys which were created using templates supplied with the software, then it will already be turned on and you just need to activate it. So just to confirm that, I'm going to create a brand new survey now. I'm going to head back into a second instance of Snap. I'm going to click on the plus to create a new survey. And I'm just going to make use of the blank template. All the templates that are supplied with Snap sort of all do the same job. Just going to give this a name of tab example. So when this loads up, you can see that there's already a hidden id.page variable waiting at the top for me, and I simply just need to activate it, and we do that just by right-clicking and showing it. And this has some useful text in there telling you basically to overtype the various headers, but also suggesting that you move this below your first logo or your image, and also probably the title of the survey. So I'm just going to hold down my control key and arrow down. So I'm just going to overtype this with some very simple text. I'll worry too much about making it too official. Just simply going to have tab 1, tab 2, and tab 3. And I'm just going to add a couple of really simple questions. Okay, so I have a couple of questions here. What I'm now going to do is add a couple of page breaks which will then specify which of these questions will appear in which tab. Remembering that the first page break will appear on effectively the second tab. So I've got 3 tabs today, tab 1, 2 and 3, but I've only actually got 2 page breaks. Okay, that's it. Let's run a quick preview just to see what this looks like. Preview only. Okay, so we've got tab number 1 with a couple of questions on. Tab number 2 just has the 1 question, as does tab number 3. Now, obviously this example doesn't look quite as nice as my previous hospital ward example, so let's consider a few things to make it a little bit more streamlined. I'm going to head back into my other example to do that, but just before I do, just remember that the option to display things differs between different devices. So the fact that I've activated this tab on a sort of a PC or laptop, I'm on a laptop today, doesn't mean it's been activated on the sort of smaller devices or smartphone, maybe a smaller tablet device. So assuming that you do want it to sort of be in a tab format on all different types of devices, then just remembering that you do need to right click and show or activate that id.page variable. But heading back into my example, I'm going to move back into my sort of live example. So a few things to consider, and as ever, what might work for one project isn't necessarily going to be the setup for another one. So in this particular example, I've turned off the navigational buttons at the bottom. So traditionally you normally have the sort of the next, the back, maybe the reset button. So I've got those turned off in this example. So it just means that I can then move across my tabs instead. I have left them on the final tab. I've got the save and the submit button on there. Again, just remembering that that's effectively a formatting option. So if you have got 3 different editions in the background, your sort of phone version, your PC version and your tablet version, again, it's just making sure that you decide which editions are going to have which buttons. Now, going back to my live version, I'm just going to start it again. Now, as mentioned at the beginning, we've got some text up here at the moment. As I choose my ward, that text changes. And I've done that using text substitution, which is it's just useful because as I'm moving across my tabs, if I come back at a later stage, I'm always going to see which ward that is that we're auditing, just as a sort of a double check. So if we head back into desktop to look at how that was achieved, you can see I have a dynamic field up there. But rather than taking the data straight from question 1, which is this question, you can see question 1 down the bottom, is actually basing its data off a derived variable called ward, which I'll show you in just a second. The reason we're not taking the data straight from question 1 is that when you initially load up the survey or form, of course, they wouldn't have selected which ward it was, so it would initially say auditing no reply. So rather than it displaying no reply, which I didn't really want, I've just created a derived variable called ward. If they select one of the normal answers, so question 1 to 6, and question 1 equals 1 all the way through to question 1 equals 6, they're going to get the ward names. But initially, as I said, when you load the survey up, no wards would have been selected. So effectively, question 1 will be a no reply or an NR. So instead, they will get the please select a ward. And if I head back into the live survey, just go through. If I start taking some data out, you can see I've set certain questions up as must answer questions. And what I've done is actually just edit the text which pops up to make it a bit more relevant to this audit. So again, just to point you in that direction where that's done. So moving back into Snap and into questionnaire properties. Down the bottom we have text. And these are all the messages which pop up during a live survey. And one of those is this information is required for the audit. So originally the default text was please provide an answer for this question. So I've just made it a bit more relevant to this particular audit. Now, sticking with question 1 and the rest of the questions actually within the tab. So we've got question 1, question 2A and 2B. So I've actually set all these to be must answer questions. And that works quite well in my audit today because ultimately if they don't tell us which ward and who it is that they're auditing, then really the rest of the survey makes no sense at all. In other scenarios, that's not going to be quite so suitable because it may be that those must answer questions are spread amongst the different tabs. So it just means if some of these were must answer questions, it wouldn't let me jump between the tabs because there were must answer questions on that page. So in that case, if that was the case, we'd need to have a look at maybe a different approach. And today I've done that by making use of some pop-ups. So for the medical record section for this particular question, I hadn't actually set it as a must answer question, but instead I've got a statement popping up which will appear until they answer that question. Now this is actually just an instruction. You can see it says like instruction because I've formatted it to make it stand out a little bit. I've got a sort of blue arrow, I've got some red text, etc. And I've got some routing set up on there. So that's question 3. But the routing on the instruction is make it pop up if question 3 has not been answered. So it's a no reply. And I've got exactly the same for the patient experience for the very first question. Obviously the routing this time is based on that particular question, question 10. This approach means, if I go back to my live survey, that although this is a must answer question, I can still jump between even though I haven't filled it in. Obviously as I fill it in, one disappears. If I move up to the final sort of save and submit, you can see though I have another note which is set to appear for as long as basically those must answer questions haven't been answered. So you can see at the moment that message is there because this hasn't been answered. If I try and submit, again, it warns me that I need to go and look at this information. So at this stage, I can go back and sort of fly through here, looking to see where my must answer questions are. Okay. Now, to show you how that was done, again, back into Desktop Snap. So on my thank you message, looks like I've got another instruction, but actually this time it's a single choice question, but it's a single choice question which is impossible to complete because I've actually gone into show and I've turned off the code box. So I'll just turn that on a second. So I've turned off the code box, so no one's able to answer that question, but I have made that question a must answer question. So it's actually a must answer question which is impossible to answer. Obviously that question only pops up if any of those must answer questions have not been answered. So just a different way of sort of getting around that must answer question without sort of forcing people to complete questions when perhaps they're not in a position to give that answer at that point. Something else I've added to this survey is some information to help the person sort of gather what information is still required. So you can see some of these tabs as I've been filling them in, they've been adding some extra information in there. So it's 67% completed. As soon as I tick the box, I get a tick and 100%. So again, just useful if people are going to be returning back to fill this up at a future stage, or if maybe a different colleague's going to be coming along and they need to know which bits are still required. And you can see now that I've actually answered all the must answer questions, my message has disappeared, so I can go ahead and submit. So let's have a look at how we go about putting the sort of tick and the percentage at the end. So back into Snap, and I'll move up to the tab question, so the id.page question. And you can see there's 2 bits of dynamic text next to each of the sort of tab headers. So we've got the first one called tick, and then I've just named it WMP, so ward and patient, and then tick MR, so tick medical records. So the first one is stating whether a tick should appear or not, and the percent one is working out what percentage of the questions on that tab have been answered. So we'll stick with the first tab, looking at tick WP to begin with. So this is based on question 1, question 2A and question 2B. So these are derived variables. You can see I've got a number down the bottom. So let's look at tick WMP. So I've got 2 potential, it's a single response first of all, and I've got 2 potential options. So if question 1 is okay, which basically just means it's been answered in one way or the other, and question 2A and question 2B. So if all 3 of those questions have been answered, a tick will appear. If any of those are a no reply, so the top one's an and, the one below is an or. So if any of those 3 questions have not been answered, so they're no replies, they're going to get effectively nothing appearing. I say nothing, there is actually a space in there. So effectively a space will appear rather than a tick. Now the tick, by the way, if I just double click on that one, has been added using a different type of font, and you can get that off your character map on your computer. So if you just type in character map into your search bar, search for this font and then search for check, and there's a number of ticks that you can just copy and paste from. Okay, looking at the calculation, so it's the percent WMP. So this time it's a quantity derived variable, and I'm actually going to do, we've got quite a long statement there, and I appreciate this is quite small, so I'm just going to pop back into my PowerPoint presentation, and I've made that a little bit bigger, so hopefully you can see it a bit easier. So it's a derived variable which is working out how many answers have been given based on how many possible answers there were. So if we try and sort of decipher what this means, it's basically saying if question 1 has been answered, give it a point. If question 2A has been answered, give it a point. If question 2B has been answered, give it a point. Add those points together, so could be a possible 3. Divide it by the number of questions on that particular tab, which was 3, and then convert it to a percentage with the times 100. So I've got a number of different derived variables. Obviously, some will be looking at questions 4, 5, and 6. Some might have sort of 4 or 5 different questions in here, so the expressions could get quite long, but it's just a case of pick out the individual questions, add a point if they've been answered, and then add it to the rest of the questions. Okay. And as I said, you can see I've got similar calculations for the different tab headers. Now, it's worth pointing out the approach of sort of working out the percent completed. You might need to consider what questions you're asking for. For example, in my survey today, I have some open-ended ones which people may or may not answer that question. These might be must-answer questions. Sometimes you're going to have a question such as, if you've got any further comments, add them here. So it's very likely that often those wouldn't be filled in. So when you're working out your calculations, you might want to avoid or not include this type of question in those sort of percent calculations. Okay, so those last couple of things that we've been talking about involve a little bit more input from the survey designer, but they do add to the overall feel. But there will certainly be occasions where I'm sure that sort of level of complexity isn't required. Now, before we finish off, for anyone who is only using Snap XMP Online, so they don't have access to desktop like we did today, then you can still produce a tab design by, again, making use of the templates. So if I pop back into Snap Online, just close this survey down, I'm going to create a brand new survey in my webinars folder again. I'll make use of the blank template, but as mentioned, they all have the tabbed options in there. Just give it a name of online example. And you can see I've got that hidden id.page variable again at the top. I can go into that question and show it. Again, just remembering that that is only showing it on the PC version. I potentially need to do it on the other ones. So you can either go into each of those editions one at a time and show them, or it may be quicker to go into more and manage visibility. And that way you can just say, I also want it to show on the tablet and the phone. So effectively, this is activating that tabbed feature again. And then really it's just a case of what we did before, overtyping the tab headers, adding your questions, and of course adding those page breaks to tell Snap which questions appear in which tab, remembering that the first page break will appear on the questions which are going to appear in the second tab. So typically you will have one less page break than you will have the number of tabs. Okay, just one very quick thing to finish off. Today I've been showing you how to activate the tab control feature when building new surveys via templates in Snap. So whether that was the new templates in Snap XMP desktop, or as you've just seen here, the new templates in Snap XMP Online. But you may well have old templates which were created prior to this feature, so your own sort of branded templates, or you might be wishing to turn an old designed survey, so a survey which was designed potentially years ago, last week, last month, whenever, but basically you might want to effectively turn an older survey into a tab design. My advice on the latter, though, is that although it does seem a good idea to clone things, it's always good every now and again to create a survey from scratch, because before you know it, you're going to have a so-called new survey, which really is just a clone of a survey which was a clone of a clone, and suddenly your survey's really 10 years old. So making use of the new templates will put in all the updated design and lots of the new features. Anyway, my main point, if you're looking at a survey and you can't see the id.page variable, then you're going to need to activate that yourself. So again, just going to head into Snap and going to look at a survey which was actually created probably 2 years ago, I think. So I'm going to double click on this one. So you can see there's no id.page at the top. So I'm going to need to pop into questionnaire properties. And we come down to power data. So these are all the sort of system variables in the background where it's recording the date and the time and how long each survey took to be completed. But we also have page in there, and we just need to turn it on. Again, remembering that we also need to turn it on for the tablet and the phone edition. So it would then be a case of adding your text as before. So again, I'll keep it very, very simple. This survey's already got the page breaks in, so I've got 3 tabs and 2 page breaks. The one other thing we just need to do is make sure that this is set as an actual tab control. At the moment, if not, this would effectively just work like routing. So if someone clicked on tab 2, it'd be a normal question that displays like this. It would jump to the sort of tab 2 section, but this question wouldn't display as an actual tab setup. So to do that, we go to show as tab control. So just that little final step is effectively what converts it to the sort of tab layout. Okay, I'll do a very quick preview. There we go. Now, again, ideally I'll take a little bit of time just to perhaps remove some of these buttons, maybe get rid of the progress bar because they're not really required. Okay, so that was everything that I had planned to show you today. We've had a look at how to activate the tab control feature for new surveys created in both the desktop and online element of Snap XMP. We've discussed how you might enhance the dynamic functionality to assist the respondent with their progress. And I've just shown you how to add the tab control feature to an existing project, or indeed how to add it into your own branded templates. On screen now are 3 QR codes. The first one will take you off to our support hub page, which will just take you through, very similar to what I've done, of how to convert your surveys to a tab control form. The second one is a reminder of how to create or edit your own templates. So for those of you that wanted to add the tab control feature into perhaps any existing templates, or of course create some new templates to begin with. That is a webinar, by the way, so if you're fed up of listening to me, there are also worksheets on there, so you don't have to listen to me going on. And then the last one will direct you to a short questionnaire about today's webinar. Alternatively, there is a link in the chat at the top of this page, and I will be sending you an email in the next day or so, which will include a link to these resources and also a copy of today's video. Thank you for joining me, and we'll hopefully see you again soon.